The man found a small, lost boy in the market's trash. When he approached him, he was horrified by the photo that was in his hands. The bitter winter wind howled through the dark alley behind Harrison's supermarket, where 9-year-old Lucas Thompson huddled against a pile of discarded boxes. His small fingers, red from the cold, clutched a crumpled photograph, the only warmth he had in this desolate place. The image showed a beautiful woman with kind eyes and a gentle smile, his mother Sarah, captured in happier times. "Mum will come back," Lucas whispered to himself, his breath forming small clouds in the freezing air. "She always comes back," but the words rang hollow in the pre-dawn silence. Yesterday, his mother had gone to the supermarket to talk to his father, James Harrison, about overdue child support. She never returned home. Tears froze on his cheeks as he remembered their last conversation. "Stay home, sweetheart. I'll be back soon," she had promised, kissing his forehead. But hours turned into an eternity, and the empty apartment became unbearable. So here he was, waiting behind his father's supermarket, determined to find answers. The sound of approaching footsteps made Lucas shrink further into the shadows. Store manager Michael Anderson, arriving early to prepare for the day, almost missed the small figure in the darkness. But something caught his eye, a flash of white against the grimy wall. The photograph. The photograph. "Dear God," Michael breathed, his heart stopping as he recognized the child. "Lucas? What are you doing here?" He knelt beside the boy, shrugging off his coat to wrap around the shivering child. Lucas looked up, his eyes red from crying and lack of sleep. His next words would haunt Michael forever. "My mom came to see my dad yesterday," he said, his voice trembling. "She never came back. Nobody will tell me where she is." He held up the photograph, his small hands shaking. "This is her. She's beautiful, isn't she? Dad can't pretend he didn't recognize her." Michael felt a cold that had nothing to do with the winter air. He remembered yesterday's commotion, the police, Sarah Thompson being led away in handcuffs while James Harrison watched with cold satisfaction. The memory of his own cowardice standing by, doing nothing, hit him like a physical blow. Looking at Lucas's hopeful face, Michael made a decision that would change everything. Sometimes, he realized, the biggest acts of courage start with the smallest moments of choice. If this heart-wrenching opening moves you, there's much more to come in this story of love, justice, and redemption. Join our community of storytellers by subscribing now. Together, we'll explore the depths of human resilience and the triumph of hope over despair. Sarah Thompson's life was a testament to the relentless spirit of a mother's love. At 34, her once bright smile had been weathered by years of hardship, but her eyes still held an unbreakable determination. Every morning began at 4 a.m. when she would quietly slip out of their modest one-bedroom apartment, careful not to wake Lucas, leaving him with a handwritten note and a prepared breakfast. Her daily routine was a grueling marathon across town. From 5 a.m. to 1 p.m., she cleaned offices in the business district, her hands raw from harsh chemicals, but her mind focused on Lucas's future. Between 2 p.m. and 6 p.m., she worked as a waitress at the local diner, where every tip meant one more meal, one more school supply, or one piece of clothing for her growing boy. After a brief respite to prepare dinner for Lucas and help with his homework, she would head to her night shift as a hospital cafeteria worker until midnight. The community's judgment weighed heavily on her shoulders. James Harrison, her ex-husband and owner of the town's largest supermarket, had systematically destroyed her reputation. Whispers followed her everywhere, did you hear? She tried to extort money from James Harrison. I heard she abandoned their marriage for another man. Poor James. Having to deal with such a woman, the lies spread like poison through their small town, making every interaction a potential source of pain. But it was the isolation that hurt the most. Former friends crossed the street to avoid her. Parents at Lucas's school pulled their children away when she approached, and even her own family had distanced themselves, believing James's carefully crafted narrative. The only truth that mattered to Sarah was in Lucas's eyes, pure love and trust that made every sacrifice worthwhile. Their tiny apartment, though sparsely furnished, was filled with evidence of their bond. Homework assignments proudly displayed on the refrigerator, each bearing Lucas's careful handwriting and Sarah's encouraging notes. A collection of small stones they gathered on their Sunday walks arranged on the windowsill, each one holding a memory of laughter and shared stories. A worn photo album filled not with expensive vacations or grand celebrations, but with precious moments captured in their daily life together. Despite working 3 jobs, Sarah struggled to keep up with the mounting bills. James's refusal to pay child support had created a crushing financial burden. She kept a careful ledger hidden in her dresser drawer, tracking every penny, often going without meals herself to ensure Lucas never went hungry. The worn pages showed the impossible math of survival: rent, utilities, food, school supplies, and medical bills always exceeding her meager income. Yet Sarah never let Lucas see her cry. Each night after he fell asleep, she would sit at their small kitchen table, writing in her journal letters to her son that she hoped would help him understand someday. "My dearest Lucas," she would write, "your smile gives me strength. Every sacrifice is worth it because you exist. Never let anyone make you doubt your worth or the truth of our love." The unspoken weight of James's continued presence in their lives cast a long shadow. His supermarket was the only affordable grocery store in their neighborhood, forcing Sarah to shop there despite the humiliation. Each visit meant enduring stares from employees who had been warned about her, watching security guards follow her through aisles as if she were a criminal, and sometimes finding her carefully selected items mysteriously out of stock when she reached the checkout. But Sarah Thompson refused to be broken. She held her head high, taught Lucas the value of dignity in the face of adversity, and never stopped fighting for justice. Her resilience was not just about survival, it was about showing her son that love could overcome any obstacle, that truth would eventually prevail over lies, and that their bond was stronger than any hardship life could throw at them. In the quiet moments before dawn, as she prepared for another day of endless work, Sarah would look at Lucas's sleeping face and find renewed purpose. Her son deserved a world where truth mattered, where justice existed, and where love conquered all. Until that world existed, she would continue to build it for him, one exhausting day at a time. James Harrison stood behind the polished counter of his supermarket, every inch the successful businessman in his tailored suit and carefully maintained silver hair. At 52, he had built Harrison's supermarket into the most profitable business in town, but beneath the veneer of respectability lay a heart hardened by greed and a soul corrupted by power. His office, perched above the store floor like a watchtower, was a monument to his carefully constructed image. Awards for business excellence hung alongside newspaper clippings praising his charitable donations, all strategically placed to impress visitors. Yet each achievement masked a darker truth: donations that were tax write-offs, awards bought through manipulated numbers, and a reputation built on carefully crafted lies. The store's security cameras fed directly to monitors on his desk, allowing him to watch his employees and customers like a predator studying prey. He took particular satisfaction in observing Sarah's rare visits to the store, directing security to follow her, enjoying the power he still held over his ex-wife's life. "Watch her carefully," he would instruct. "People like her can't be trusted." Behind the public facade, James's financial empire was built on quicksand. He had mastered the art of cooking books, hiding losses, and manipulating inventory records. The store's basement held boxes of documents detailing a complex web of fraud, falsified tax returns, phantom inventory, and laundered money from mysterious investors. Each night, he would meticulously update his records, ensuring every fraudulent transaction appeared legitimate. His treatment of employees revealed his true nature. While he played the role of benevolent employer in public, behind closed doors he was a tyrant, wages were frequently delayed, overtime went unpaid, and any complaint was met with immediate termination. He kept a special file of dirt on each employee, insurance against any potential whistleblower. The child support he owed Sarah was a mere fraction of his wealth, but withholding it gave him a perverse pleasure. Let her struggle, he would mutter, reviewing the growing arrears. She needs to learn her place. Each court order for payment was met with an army of lawyers who would tie the process in endless legal knots. His relationship with Lucas, or rather the lack thereof, demonstrated the depth of his callousness. Birthday cards returned unopened, Christmas gifts refused, and every attempt at contact rebuffed. "The boy's better off without me," he would tell his lawyers, but the truth was darker. Lucas represented a responsibility he never wanted, a reminder of emotions he couldn't control. In quiet moments when the store was closed and he sat alone in his office, James would sometimes look at old family photos, not with nostalgia but with contempt. Each image represented a failure to maintain control, a moment when emotions had weakened his resolve. He had learned his lesson well: love was a liability, family a burden, and trust a weapon to be wielded against the weak. Recent financial pressures had begun to crack his carefully maintained facade. Competitors were eating into his profits, suppliers were demanding higher prices, and the fraudulent schemes that had sustained him were becoming harder to hide. The stress manifested in increased cruelty toward his staff and an obsession with destroying Sarah's remaining reputation in town. His latest plan, orchestrating Sarah's arrest on false charges, was the culmination of years of calculated malice. He had carefully planted evidence, manipulated witnesses, and ensured the local police would see things his way. In his mind, it was simply business eliminating a threat to his carefully constructed world. Yet even as he celebrated his victory, watching Sarah being led away in handcuffs, a flicker of unease crossed his face. The sight of her quiet dignity, the whispers of doubt among his loyal employees, and the growing questions from the community suggested that perhaps, for the first time, he had miscalculated. The control he so desperately craved was beginning to slip through his fingers like grains of sand. Michael Anderson had spent 15 years as Harrison's supermarket's manager, his quiet competence masking a deeper struggle with his conscience. At 41, his kind brown eyes and prematurely graying hair reflected years of witnessing injustice while feeling powerless to act. The weight of his inaction had become increasingly difficult to bear, especially since Sarah Thompson had first walked into the store seeking help. His own past haunted him daily. 6 years ago, he had lost his younger brother Thomas in a tragic accident, the result of corporate negligence and covered-up safety violations. The company responsible had escaped justice through legal manipulation, leaving Michael with a burning awareness of how the powerful could abuse the system. He saw echoes of that same injustice in James Harrison's treatment of Sarah and Lucas. The small office he occupied beneath James's grand one told its own story. While James's space boasted expensive furniture and prestigious awards, Michael's realm was filled with evidence of his connection to the community: thank you notes from employees he had helped, pictures drawn by their children, and a worn notebook filled with careful records of every instance of James's misconduct he had secretly documented over the years. His feelings for Sarah had developed gradually, beginning with simple admiration for her dignity in the face of harassment. He noticed how she would hold her head high despite the whispers, how she always found a kind word for the store's employees, even those who treated her poorly. Her strength in adversity reminded him of his mother, who had raised 3 boys alone after their father's death. But it was her relationship with Lucas that truly moved him. He would watch from a distance as she helped her son pick out school supplies, calculating costs on a worn calculator, the love between them evident in every interaction. The boy's resilience, his unfailing defense of his mother despite the cruel rumors, stirred something deep in Michael's heart. The secret savings account he maintained told another story: years of carefully setting aside money, preparing for a day when he might need to take a stand, Every spare dollar went into this fund, his personal insurance against the moment when conscience would demand action over security. The balance had grown steadily, along with his private resolve to someday make a difference. At night, in his modest apartment, Michael would often sit at his desk reviewing the evidence he had gathered against James. False inventory reports, manipulated financial statements, records of employee abuse, a paper trail of corruption that could bring down the entire operation. Yet fear had always held him back, the memory of his brother's case reminding him how the powerful could twist justice to their advantage. His own life had become a careful balance between maintaining his position and preserving his humanity. He approved extra breaks for exhausted employees, quietly helped those struggling with bills, and did what he could to shield workers from James's worst excesses. Small acts of kindness that didn't challenge the system but helped him sleep at night. The photo of Thomas on his desk served as both inspiration and rebuke. His brother had been a fighter, someone who stood up against injustice regardless of the cost. Sometimes Thomas had told him shortly before his death, "Doing nothing is the same as doing wrong." Those words echoed louder with each passing day. In his heart, Michael knew he was falling in love with Sarah, though he had never acted on these feelings. It wasn't just her beauty or strength that attracted him, but the fundamental goodness she represented, the opposite of everything James Harrison stood for. His growing affection for Lucas only complicated matters, the boy's trust and innocence reminding him of all that needed protection in the world. Each morning, as he opened the store, Michael would see his reflection in the dark windows and question the man looking back at him. Was he a coward for not acting sooner, or was he wise to wait for the right moment? The discovery of Lucas sleeping behind the store would force him to finally answer these questions, to choose between safe silence and dangerous action. The morning Sarah Thompson walked into Harrison's supermarket, the air seemed to crackle with tension. She had chosen a Tuesday, typically the store's quietest day, hoping to minimize the spectacle that would inevitably follow. Her hands trembled slightly as she clutched a stack of unpaid bills and court documents, but her spine was steel straight, her chin lifted with quiet dignity. "I need to speak with James," she told the front desk clerk, her voice steady despite the curious stares from early morning shoppers. The clerk, a young woman who had heard the rumors but never met Sarah in person, was struck by the disconnect between the supposed troublemaker and the composed woman before her. "Mr. Harrison is very busy," she began, but Sarah cut her off gently. "Tell him it's about Lucas, about his son." The mention of Lucas sent ripples through the store. Employees who had been pretending not to watch suddenly found other tasks, though their ears remained tuned to the unfolding drama. Michael, organizing inventory nearby, felt his heart race as he overheard the exchange. He had seen this coming, had dreaded it, knowing James's likely reaction. James Harrison's response was swift and calculated. He emerged from his office like a king descending to address a peasant, his expensive suit and practiced smile a sharp contrast to Sarah's worn but clean clothing. "What is the meaning of this disruption?" he demanded loudly, ensuring everyone could hear. "Haven't you caused enough trouble?" Sarah refused to be baited into a public argument. Instead, she held out the stack of papers. "Lucas's school needs new supplies. His winter coat is too small. The heating bill is overdue. You haven't paid child support in 8 months, James. He's your son too." Her voice carried just far enough to reach those nearest, each word weighted with truth. James's smile turned cruel. "Interesting how you only remember me when you want money. Perhaps if you managed your finances better," he paused, ensuring his next words would carry, "or found more respectable work than your late-night activities." The implication hung in the air, another deliberate stain on her reputation. Sarah's cheeks flushed, but she stood her ground. "Every penny I earn is honest money, James. 3 jobs, all legal, all documented. Unlike some earnings I could mention," she kept her voice low, but the threat was clear. Years of working in his store had given her glimpses of his questionable practices. But The change in James's demeanor was immediate and chilling. His smile vanished, replaced by something dark and dangerous. "Security," he called, his voice unnaturally calm. "This woman is trespassing and making threats. Call the police." He turned to the gathering crowd. "You all heard her threaten me, didn't you?" Michael stepped forward then, his conscience finally overwhelming his caution. "Mr. Harrison, perhaps we could discuss this in private," but James cut him off with a glare that promised consequences. "Stay out of this, Anderson. Focus on your job if you want to keep it." Sarah watched the security guards approach, her heart breaking not for herself but for Lucas. "He asks about you," she said softly to James. "Every birthday, every Christmas. He still believes there must be good in his father." The words struck home. A flicker of something crossed James's face before his mask slammed back into place. The police arrived with practiced efficiency, their familiarity with James Harrison evident in their automatic deference to his version of events. As they led Sarah away, she held her head high, dignity intact despite the handcuffs. "Tell Lucas I love him," she called to Michael, who stood helpless, watching another injustice unfold. The morning's events left a stain on the store's atmosphere that no amount of forced cheerfulness could erase. Employees whispered among themselves, some questioning for the first time the stories they'd been told about Sarah Thompson. James Harrison retreated to his office, his victory somehow feeling hollow in the face of his ex-wife's quiet strength. Michael Anderson remained at his post, outwardly calm but inwardly seething. The image of Sarah being led away, her last thoughts for her son, burned in his mind. He touched the deposit slip in his pocket, his secret savings, accumulated over years of watching and waiting. Perhaps the time for waiting was finally over. The police station's fluorescent lights cast harsh shadows across Sarah Thompson's face as she sat handcuffed to the interview room chair. The charge sheet in front of her read criminal trespassing, harassment, and attempted extortion. Each word a carefully crafted lie from James Harrison's arsenal of destruction. Detective Williams, a veteran officer who had known James for years through generous donations to the police department's charity events, conducted the interrogation with barely concealed bias. "Mrs. Thompson, multiple witnesses heard you threatening Mr. Harrison. Care to explain?" His pen hovered over the notepad, ready to twist her words into further evidence against her. Sarah's voice remained steady, though her heart raced. "I asked for legally mandated child support for our son. Is that a threat now, Detective?" The bruises forming on her wrists from the too tight handcuffs matched the growing fear in her heart, not for herself, but for Lucas, alone at home, waiting for a mother who wouldn't return. Across town, Lucas sat at their kitchen table, homework untouched, watching the clock tick past his mother's usual return time. The neighbor who usually checked on him, Mrs. Martinez, paced nervously, her calls to Sarah's phone going straight to voicemail. The growing darkness outside seemed to mirror the shadow creeping over their small world. Back at the station, the system moved with mechanical indifference. Sarah's request for a phone call was delayed due to procedural issues. Her plea to contact Lucas met with bureaucratic silence. Each hour that passed was another hour her son spent wondering, waiting, fearing. The weight of James's influence pressed down like a physical force, bending justice to his will. The public defender assigned to her case arrived looking harried and overworked. "Look, Mrs. Thompson," he said, barely glancing at her file, "with your history." Sarah interrupted. "What history?" "Every charge James ever filed was dismissed." But the lawyer continued as if she hadn't spoken. "The best option is to plead guilty to trespassing. Minimum sentence, probably out in a few days." Sarah's refusal to plead guilty launched a chain of events that would echo through the community. "I won't lie to save myself," she declared. "My son deserves to know his mother stood for truth." Her words, spoken quietly but with absolute conviction, gave the young public defender pause. For the first time he actually looked at her, really looked, and saw not the troublemaker in his case file, but a mother fighting for her child. In the holding cell, Sarah found herself surrounded by the town's forgotten and marginalized, women with similar stories of justice denied, of powerful men twisting the law to their advantage. As night fell, they shared their stories, forming a sisterhood of the wronged. Sarah's quiet strength and unwavering focus on Lucas inspired them, while their support helped her maintain her resolve. Mrs. Martinez finally called the school counselor, who had always shown kindness to Lucas. Together, they broke the news to the boy that his mother had been arrested. Lucas's reaction was not the tears they expected, but a determined set to his small jaw. "My mum is not a criminal," he stated with absolute certainty, "and I'm going to prove it." The night grew longer, colder. Sarah lay on the hard cell bunk, composing mental letters to Lucas. "My darling boy," she thought, "sometimes standing up for what's right means standing alone. But know that every moment away from you is agony, every breath without you is pain." Her silent tears fell unnoticed in the darkness. The morning papers carried the story "Local business owner harassed by ex-wife." The article, clearly influenced by James's connections, painted Sarah as a desperate woman making unfounded demands. But a few careful readers noticed the discrepancies, the too perfect narrative, the missing details about the unpaid child support. Michael Anderson read the article with growing rage, noting how it mentioned James's charitable works but omitted any reference to Lucas. The final line about Sarah's history of troubling behavior pushed him to action. He began making calls, reaching out to old contacts in the legal community, drawing on favors saved for just such a moment. As dawn broke on Sarah's first full day in custody, the machinery of James's influence continued to grind away at her rights. Bail was set impossibly high, court dates were delayed, and her requests for proper legal representation were lost in administrative limbo. But what James hadn't counted on was the quiet rebellion beginning to stir in his own store, in the community, and in the heart of a 9-year-old boy who refused to believe the lies about his mother. Finding Lucas behind the supermarket that cold morning became the catalyst that shattered Michael Anderson's carefully maintained neutrality. The sight of the boy, curled up against the garbage bins, clutching his mother's photograph, struck him with the force of a physical blow. Every justification he had made for his years of silence crumbled in the face of this child's suffering. "I should have helped her yesterday," he whispered, wrapping his coat around Lucas's shivering shoulders. The boy looked up at him with Sarah's eyes, trust and hope mixed with desperation. "Can you help find my mom?" Lucas asked, his voice small but determined. "Dad won't talk to me, but you're nice. You always smile at us when we shop here." The simple observation cut deep into Michael's conscience. How many times had he offered that smile, that small kindness, while allowing greater injustices to unfold? He helped Lucas to his feet, mind racing through possibilities. The store's security cameras would have recorded everything from yesterday. James wouldn't have thought to erase them yet, too confident in his power over his employees. Leading Lucas to his small office, Michael made a decision that would change both their lives. "Wait here," he told the boy, providing hot chocolate from his personal break room supply. "I'm going to make some calls." The first was to his sister, a social worker who had often spoken about the flaws in the system. The second was to a lawyer friend who owed him a favor, a big one. As he dialed, Michael's eyes fell on the photograph of his brother Thomas. "You were right," he murmured to the image. Doing nothing is the same as doing wrong. The memory of Thomas's fight against corporate corruption, which had ultimately cost him his life, had haunted Michael for years. Now, looking at Lucas warming his hands around the hot chocolate cup, he finally understood what his brother had died defending. The security footage revealed more than even Michael had expected. James's calculated aggression, the manufactured scene, the deliberate escalation, all captured in high definition. More importantly, it recorded Sarah's quiet dignity, her reasonable requests, and the complete absence of any threats. Evidence that directly contradicted the police report. Working quickly, Michael copied the footage before James arrived. Each file represented a piece of ammunition in the fight to come, but he knew video evidence alone wouldn't be enough. James had too much influence, too many connections. This would require a different kind of courage. Opening his desk drawer, Michael pulled out the notebook where he'd documented years of James's misdeeds. Every faked inventory report, every instance of wage theft, every suspicious transaction detailed in his precise handwriting. He had kept it as insurance, telling himself it was protection. Now he recognized it for what it really was: evidence of his own complicity through inaction. Lucas watched him with curious eyes, somehow sensing the importance of the moment. "Mum says we should always do what's right," he offered suddenly, "even when it's hard. Even when we're scared." The simple wisdom of a child, channeling Sarah's strength, made Michael's path clear. He picked up the phone one final time, this time calling the Regional Labor Board. "My name is Michael Anderson," he began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "I need to report multiple violations at Harrison's supermarket." As he spoke, he watched Lucas pull out his homework, the boy's unwavering faith in his mother's return, giving him the strength to maintain normal routines, despite everything. The next hours passed in a blur of activity. Michael arranged temporary care for Lucas with Mrs. Martinez, whom he knew Sarah trusted. He gathered more evidence, made more calls, and began building the case that would eventually expose James's empire of lies. Each action felt like a weight lifting, years of suppressed conscience finally breaking free. By the time James Harrison arrived at the store, Michael had already set in motion events that couldn't be stopped. Looking at his employer's confident stride, his casual cruelty to the morning staff, Michael felt something he hadn't experienced in years: hope. Not just for Sarah and Lucas, but for himself, for the community, for justice itself. Sometimes, he told Lucas as he drove him to Mrs. Martinez's house, "It takes seeing someone else's courage to find your own." The boy nodded, understanding more than his years would suggest. In his small hands he still clutched his mother's photograph, but now it felt less like a lifeline and more like a promise of justice to come. Michael Anderson's investigation into James Harrison's empire began in the pre-dawn hours, hunched over his laptop in his small apartment. The security footage from Sarah's arrest played on repeat as he documented every detail, every inconsistency between what happened and what the police report claimed. But it was the encrypted files on his flash drive that held the real dynamite. Years of working as store manager had given him access to the true financial records, not the sanitized versions James presented to auditors. Columns of numbers told a story of systematic fraud, phantom inventory that existed only on paper, inflated expenses that masked cash withdrawals, and a pattern of tax evasion that would make even the most hardened accountant blanch. "Check the Clayton Market bankruptcy," his lawyer friend advised during a late-night call. "Something feels off about how Harrison acquired that property following the trail." Michael discovered a familiar pattern. Clayton's Market, once a thriving family business, had mysteriously failed after James became a minority investor. The parallels to current events sent chills down his spine. The deeper he dug, the darker the picture became. Former employees of Clayton's Market, once silenced by fear and NDAs, began to talk when Michael reached out. Each conversation revealed another piece of the puzzle: strategic sabotage, manipulated inventory, manufactured health code violations. James hadn't just bought Clayton's Market, he had systematically destroyed it. Working methodically through his files, Michael created a timeline of James's activities. The pattern was clear: identify struggling businesses, invest minimal capital, manipulate records to create artificial crises, then swoop in to save the business by buying it at a fraction of its worth. Sarah's child support wasn't being withheld due to lack of funds. James's offshore accounts were flush with cash from his schemes. But the most damning evidence came from an unexpected source. A junior accountant, recently fired for questioning discrepancies in the books, had kept her own records. "I knew something was wrong," she told Michael over coffee, sliding a USB drive across the table. The numbers for the children's charity fundraiser never added up. The drive contained proof that donations meant for local children's programs had been diverted to James's personal accounts. Michael's hands shook as he compiled the evidence. The same charity that James used to boost his public image, hosting grand galas and presenting oversized checks for the cameras, was being used to launder money. Every charitable act had been a calculated move in a complex shell game, with the community's most vulnerable as unwitting pawns. The investigation took an emotional toll. Each new discovery felt like a personal betrayal, forcing Michael to confront his own role in enabling James's schemes through years of silence. The photo of his brother Thomas seemed to watch him as he worked, reminding him that redemption often comes at a price. Late one night, reviewing security footage from years past, Michael found something that made his blood run cold. A clip showed James threatening a young mother who had questioned the store's pricing, his face twisted with the same cruel satisfaction he had shown during Sarah's arrest. The woman's child, crying in her shopping cart, could have been Lucas. The parallel was unmistakable. This had never been just about business. As dawn broke after another sleepless night, Michael organized his findings into 3 separate files, one for the Labor Board, one for the IAS, and one for the district attorney. Each contained irrefutable evidence of different aspects of James's crimes. But he kept the most damaging revelations in a 4th file, one that would ensure Sarah's immediate release and Lucas's future security. The next step required careful timing. James's influence ran deep, and one wrong move could bury the evidence before it reached the right hands. Michael began making strategic contacts, building a network of allies who had their own reasons to want justice. Each person he approached represented another crack in James's carefully constructed facade. Looking at Lucas's small figure doing homework in his office after school, Mrs. Martinez, now bringing him there instead of home to an empty apartment, Michael felt the weight of responsibility settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just about exposing fraud or righting wrongs. It was about protecting the child's faith in justice, about showing him that his mother's courage wasn't in vain. "We're going to bring your mum home," he promised Lucas, watching the boy's face light up with hope. "But first, we're going to make sure your dad can never hurt either of you again." The evidence was ready. The allies were in place. Now it was time to begin dismantling James Harrison's empire, one damning revelation at a time. The first cracks in James Harrison's carefully constructed public image appeared in the most unexpected places. It began with whispers among the store's longtime customers, particularly after Lucas started spending afternoons in Michael's office. The sight of the quiet, well-mannered boy doing his homework, so clearly missing his mother, contradicted years of carefully crafted rumors about Sarah's parenting. Mrs. Chen, who had run the local bakery for 30 years, was the first to openly question the official narrative. "That boy," she declared loudly in the checkout line, "has better manners than most adults. Someone raised him right, and it wasn't his father, who I never see with him." Her words, spoken with the authority of a community elder, carried weight. Other customers nodded, remembering Sarah's unfailing politeness, despite their past coldness toward her. The store's employees began sharing their own observations. Jenny from the deli counter recalled how Sarah would carefully count her change, not from stinginess, but to ensure she could buy Lucas's favorite foods while staying within her tight budget. Mark from produce remembered her working multiple jobs, always tired but never complaining. Each story added another crack to the facade of the troubled ex-wife narrative James had constructed. Lucas's teacher, M.S. Roberts, became an unexpected ally after witnessing his resilience in class. "He's one of my best students," she told other parents at school pickup. "Always does his homework, helps other children, never complains despite everything happening." That speaks volumes about his home life. Her comments sparked discussions among parents who had previously shunned Sarah at school events. The community's shift accelerated when evidence of James's charitable fraud began to emerge. The Children's Sports League, which had depended on his heavily publicized donations, discovered their equipment budget was mysteriously short. Parents began comparing notes about fundraisers where the numbers didn't add up. The same people who had once praised James's generosity now questioned where their donations had really gone. Mrs. Martinez became a powerful voice for change, sharing her observations of Sarah and Lucas's daily life with her extensive network of neighborhood contacts. "I see that boy every day," she would say, her voice carrying the weight of truth. He waits for his mother's return like she's his whole world, and she works herself to exhaustion to give him everything. Tell me, what kind of bad mother does that? The turning point came during a routine PTA meeting, when the topic of the annual school fundraiser arose. James had always dominated these events, making grand gestures that overshadowed smaller contributions. But this year, as his name was mentioned, an uncomfortable silence fell. One parent stood up and asked plainly, "Do we really want to associate our children's education with someone who denies support to his own son?" Local business owners, once intimidated by James's influence, began to speak up about their own experiences. The owner of the small grocery store across town shared how James had attempted to force him out of business through predatory pricing. Others recalled similar tactics, creating a pattern that could no longer be ignored. The newspaper that had printed the biased story about Sarah's arrest received so many letters to the editor that they were forced to publish a follow-up piece, this time including community voices supporting Sarah. The reporter, investigating further, uncovered discrepancies in the police report that raised serious questions about the arrest's legitimacy. Even at church, where James had cultivated an image of respectability through generous donations, the mood shifted. The pastor, in a sermon about justice and compassion, spoke of how true character is revealed in how we treat the vulnerable. Though he named no names, the message was clear to all who heard it. Lucas, unaware of his role in this transformation, continued his daily routine between Mrs. Martinez's care and Michael's office. His quiet dignity, unfailing belief in his mother, and gentle nature touched everyone who encountered him. Just like Sarah, they would murmur, remembering her similar grace under pressure. The community's awakening manifested in small but significant ways. Anonymous groceries appeared on Mrs. Martinez's doorstep for Lucas. Parents began inviting him for playdates, something that had stopped after James's smear campaign. The local diner where Sarah had worked kept her position open, publicly declaring they were holding it for their best waitress. As these changes rippled through the community, James found his usual tactics of intimidation and manipulation meeting resistance. His threats carried less weight as people began standing together. The power he had wielded through fear and influence began to diminish, eroded by the growing tide of truth and solidarity. Michael Anderson sat in his small office late one evening, the weight of his next decision pressing heavily on his shoulders. The evidence against James Harrison was substantial. The community support was growing, but something more dramatic was needed, a move so bold it would force the truth into the open. His eyes fell on his savings account statement. 15 years of careful planning had amassed enough to make an audacious play. The store's financial reports lay spread across his desk, revealing what few others knew. Despite James's schemes, Harrison's supermarket itself was still a viable business. Its central location and loyal customer base made it valuable, even if its current owner had poisoned its reputation. Michael's years of management had given him intimate knowledge of its true worth beneath the layers of fraud and manipulation. Running his fingers over his brother Thomas's photograph, Michael remembered their last conversation. Sometimes Thomas had said, "You have to risk everything to change anything." The decision crystallized in his mind. He would offer to buy the store. Not just as a business move, but as a strategic play to force James's hand and protect the community he'd grown to love. Working through the night, Michael crafted his proposal. His savings, combined with a small business loan pre-approved through his lawyer's connections, would make a compelling offer. The timing was crucial. James's empire was showing cracks, and rumors of investigations had him on edge. A cash offer might tempt him to take the money and run before everything crumbled. Before making his move, Michael visited Sarah in jail, his first time seeing her since the arrest. Through the visiting room glass, she looked tired but unbroken. "I'm going to buy the store," he told her, watching her eyes widen in surprise. "When you're released, and you will be released, I want you to help me run it. Make it what it should have been all along, a place that serves the community, not exploits it." Sarah's response brought unexpected tears to his eyes. "You're a good man, Michael Anderson," she said softly. "Lucas was right about you all along." The mention of her son strengthened his resolve. This wasn't just about business anymore, it was about creating a future where people like Sarah and Lucas could thrive. The next morning, Michael arrived early to prepare his office. He placed his resignation letter, purchase offer, and a thick folder of evidence on his desk. The latter was his insurance proof that would go public if James attempted any retaliation. As he heard James's familiar footsteps approaching, Michael stood straighter, channeling his brother's courage. "Sir," he called out as James passed his office. "We need to talk." The surprise on James's face at Michael's tone quickly turned to annoyance, then concern as he saw the documents laid out. The conversation that followed would change both their lives forever. Michael laid out his terms clearly: a fair price for the store, immediate cessation of all actions against Sarah, and a clean break that would allow the community to heal. He watched James's expressions shift as he processed the offer: surprise, anger, calculation, and finally, a grudging respect. "You've been planning this," James said, "not a question but a realization. All these years, playing the quiet manager." Michael met his gaze steadily. "I learned from watching you, sir, the importance of patience, of waiting for the right moment. And this is that moment." The negotiation lasted hours, a complex dance of threat and counter-threat, offer and counter-offer. Michael held firm, knowing he had to win this battle not just for himself, but for Sarah, for Lucas, for the community that had suffered under James's influence for too long. As the sun set, casting long shadows through the office windows, James finally reached for the papers. His hand hesitated over the signature line, years of control about to slip away. "You'll regret this," he muttered, but his threat sounded hollow, even to himself. Michael watched him sign, feeling not triumph but a profound sense of responsibility. "No," he replied quietly, "I would have regretted not doing it." As James stalked out, Michael looked at Thomas's photo once more. "I did it, brother," he whispered. "I finally did something that matters." That evening, visiting Lucas at Mrs. Martinez's house, Michael shared the news. The boy's face lit up with hope for the first time since Sarah's arrest. "Does this mean Mom can come home?" he asked. Michael hugged him close, feeling the trust in the small body leaning against him. "Soon, buddy, very soon. And when she does, we're all going to build something amazing together." The war room for Sarah Thompson's defense took shape in Michael Anderson's living room, walls covered with evidence, flowcharts, and timelines stretching back years. Attorney Rachel Martinez, Michael's lawyer friend, stood before the assembly of documents, her experienced eyes tracking connections that would form the foundation of their case. The beauty of white-collar crime, Rachel explained to Michael as they organized evidence late into the night, is that it always leaves a paper trail. James got sloppy because he never thought anyone would dare challenge him. She held up a document showing suspicious transfers between the store's charity account and James's personal offshore holdings. "This isn't just about Sarah anymore. This is about years of systematic fraud." The team grew organically. A forensic accountant, moved by Lucas's story, volunteered his expertise during evenings and weekends. Former employees of Clayton's Market came forward with old records saved out of intuition. Even the junior accountant James had fired continued providing crucial information about his financial maneuvers. The security footage from Sarah's arrest proved invaluable, but not just for the obvious reasons. In the background, eagle-eyed viewers could spot James passing notes to the responding officers, suggesting a deeper conspiracy. Rachel's team discovered that these same officers had received suspicious bonuses through the store's charity foundation. Michael's documentation of daily operations became the backbone of their case. His meticulous notes recorded every instance of wage theft, every suspicious transaction, every whispered threat against employees who questioned James's methods. What had begun as self-preservation had transformed into a comprehensive record of corruption. The children's charity angle proved particularly damning. Records showed that while James publicly donated $100,000 annually, nearly $80,000 was quietly returned through a complex web of shell companies. Local children's sports teams had gone without promised equipment, while James used their goodwill to launder money and evade taxes. Sarah's contribution to the case, even from behind bars, proved crucial. During brief visiting hours, she provided key details about James's past behaviors, including incidents from their marriage that established a pattern of financial manipulation and emotional abuse. Her precise memory for dates and conversations gave their timeline additional credibility. But Lucas, too, played an unexpected role. His childhood drawings, saved by Sarah, showed a striking pattern: detailed pictures of empty chairs at school events where James had promised to appear, birthday cards returned unopened, carefully written letters never answered. These became powerful evidence of James's willful abandonment of his parental responsibilities. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Chen, the bakery owner, brought forward a series of receipts showing how James had attempted to force her out of business through predatory pricing and health code violations. Her meticulous record-keeping exposed a pattern that matched his takeover of Clayton's market perfectly. Rachel worked to weave these disparate threads into a cohesive legal strategy. "We're not just defending Sarah," she explained to Michael. "We're building a RICO case. Pattern of corruption, financial fraud, witness intimidation." James didn't just break laws, he built an entire business model on breaking them. The evidence suggested a strategy far beyond their original scope. Sarah's false arrest became just one component of a larger pattern of abuse of power. Each document they uncovered revealed new layers of corruption. Each witness statement added another piece to the puzzle of how James had maintained his control over the community through fear and manipulation. As their case grew stronger, so did the risks. James's increasingly erratic behavior suggested he sensed the walls closing in. Security cameras caught him removing documents from the store late at night. Anonymous threats began arriving at Michael's apartment. But each attempt at intimidation only strengthened their resolve and provided more evidence of consciousness of guilt. The final piece fell into place when they discovered James's connection to the judge originally assigned to Sarah's case. Bank records revealed suspicious payments routed through the same charity foundation to the judge's brother's construction company. Rachel immediately moved for recusal, adding judicial manipulation to their growing list of charges. Late one night, as Michael reviewed their progress, Lucas's words from weeks ago echoed in his mind. "Mom says we should always do what's right, even when it's scary." Looking at the evidence wall, at the network of corruption they had uncovered, Michael realized they were doing more than just freeing Sarah. They were dismantling a system that had allowed such injustice to flourish. Life for 9-year-old Lucas Thompson took on a surreal quality in the weeks following his mother's arrest. Each morning, he would wake up in Mrs. Martinez's spare room, momentarily forgetting why he wasn't in his own bed before reality crashed back in. The ceiling was different, the sounds were wrong, and most importantly, there was no gentle kiss from his mother to start the day. School became both a refuge and a battlefield. Lucas maintained his perfect attendance record, just as his mother would have wanted, but the whispers followed him through the hallways. Some kids, parroting their parents' gossip, would fall silent when he passed. Others, crueler in their childhood honesty, asked pointed questions. "Is your mom really a criminal? Did your dad put her in jail?" He faced each question with his mother's quiet dignity, though his heart ached with every word. During lunch periods, Lucas would sit alone at his usual table, methodically eating the sandwiches Mrs. Martinez packed. They were good sandwiches made with care, but they weren't the same as his mother's, which always came with little notes decorated with hearts and encouraging words. He kept those old notes in his pocket now, paper worn thin from constant rereading, a tangible connection to his absent mother. The hardest part of his day came after school, when other children rushed to waiting parents. Lucas would watch from Michael's office window as families reunited, his fingers pressed against the glass, remembering how his mother's eyes would light up when she saw him, no matter how tired she was from working multiple jobs. Now he divided his time between Mrs. Martinez's caring but unfamiliar home and Michael's office, trying to find normalcy in a world turned upside down. His grades never slipped. Sarah had instilled in him the importance of education, but his teachers noticed subtle changes. His normally bright creative writing became filled with stories of justice and reunion. His art projects invariably featured mothers and sons together again. M.S. Roberts, his observant teacher, kept these works carefully filed away, understanding they might be important later. At night, Lucas developed a ritual. He would take out his mother's photograph, the same one he'd clutched behind the supermarket, and tell it about his day. "I got an A on my math test, Mom," he would whisper in the darkness. "Just like you taught me sometimes," Mrs. Martinez would hear him through the thin walls, these one-sided conversations breaking her heart anew each night. The weekends were hardest. Sarah and Lucas had always spent Saturdays together, no matter how tired she was from her week of work. They would visit the park, make simple crafts, or just read together on their worn couch. Now Saturdays stretched endlessly, filled with well-meaning attempts by Mrs. Martinez and Michael to keep him occupied, but nothing could fill the void left by his mother's absence. Lucas started keeping a journal, just as his mother had taught him to do when dealing with big feelings. "Dear Mom," he wrote each day, "I'm trying to be brave like you. Michael says you'll be home soon, but soon feels like forever." These entries, written in careful childhood handwriting, captured both his pain and his unwavering faith in his mother's innocence. His father's complete absence during this crisis affected Lucas in ways he couldn't fully express. Each time the store's doors opened, part of him hoped James would finally act like the father he remembered from his earliest memories. But James remained a distant figure, visible through Michael's office window, never acknowledging his son's presence in the building he owned. The community's gradual shift in attitude toward his mother gave Lucas his first tastes of hope. He noticed when Mrs. Chen started saving him special cookies, when his classmates began inviting him to play again, when parents at school pickup would smile instead of turning away. Each small kindness felt like a brick being laid on the path that would eventually lead his mother home. Despite everything, Lucas maintained his mother's daily routines. He made his bed each morning just as she had taught him. He did his homework before playing, kept his clothes neat, and said please and thank you without fail. These habits were more than just routine, they were a connection to her, a way of keeping her presence alive in his daily life. When Michael finally told him about buying the store, Lucas's response was characteristically thoughtful. "Will this help bring Mom home?" The question, asked with such simple hope, reinforced Michael's determination to right the wrongs that had torn this family apart. Looking at Lucas's hopeful face, he understood that saving the store wasn't just about business, it was about saving the future this brave child deserved. The county jail's fluorescent lights never dimmed, creating an eternal twilight that made it impossible to tell day from night. Sarah Thompson marked time instead by her son's routines. Now Lucas would be waking up. Now he'd be in math class. Now he'd be doing homework. These thoughts of her son's daily life became her anchor in a place designed to disorient and demoralize. Each morning, Sarah joined the other women in the common area, where she quickly became known for her quiet strength. When new inmates arrived, frightened and confused, she would help them navigate the complex social dynamics of incarceration. "Focus on what you're fighting for," she would advise, while showing them how to make their beds to regulation standards. Her maternal instincts, denied their natural outlet, found expression in caring for others. The craft period became her salvation. Inmates were allowed to knit with plastic needles, and Sarah threw herself into creating a sweater for Lucas. Each stitch was a prayer, each row a promise to return home. Other women watched her methodical work, noting how she would occasionally pause to wipe away tears when she thought no one was looking. The growing sweater, in Lucas's favorite blue, became a symbol of resilience for everyone in her unit. Sarah's notebook, purchased from the commissary with borrowed funds, filled quickly with letters to Lucas. "My darling boy," she wrote, "being away from you is the hardest thing I've ever endured. But remember what I taught you sometimes: standing up for what's right means standing alone. You are never alone, though. My love is with you always." The pages absorbed her tears as she wrote late into the night. During visitor hours, Sarah maintained her composure with iron will. Whether meeting with Michael to discuss legal strategy or receiving updates about Lucas from Mrs. Martinez, she refused to let them see her break. Only the growing dark circles under her eyes and the tremor in her hands betrayed the toll of separation from her son. The hardest moments came during meals. Every Thursday, the cafeteria served spaghetti, Lucas's favorite dinner. Sarah would sit before her tray, remembering their weekly ritual of cooking together, his small hands helping to stir the sauce, his proud smile when he managed not to spill. These memories, sweet and painful, sustained her even as they threatened to break her heart. News of Michael's purchase of the store reached her through Rachel, her lawyer. The revelation that someone believed in her enough to take such a risk brought her first genuine smile since her arrest. "Tell him," she instructed Rachel, "that Lucas was right about him all along." Her faith in Michael's goodness, like her faith in justice itself, never wavered. At night, in the quiet of her cell, Sarah would stand by the narrow window, looking at the same moon she knew Lucas could see. She developed a ritual of sending him mental messages: brush your teeth, do your homework, be kind to Mrs. Martinez. These one-sided conversations helped maintain her sense of being a mother, even from behind bars. The other inmates began bringing her their own letters to read and edit, letters to judges, to children, to parole boards. Sarah's gift for finding the right words, for maintaining dignity, even in desperate circumstances, made her a valued advisor. She never charged for this help, asking only that they contribute to a collective journal of advice for their children, which grew into a powerful testament to maternal love surviving incarceration. When word reached her about Lucas sleeping behind the store, Sarah faced her darkest hour. The image of her son, alone and cold, looking for her, nearly broke her resolve. That night she paced her cell until dawn, fighting the urge to plead guilty to false charges just to get back to him. Only the memory of his faith in her kept her strong. "My mom always tells the truth," she'd heard him tell Michael. Sarah used her time to study, borrowing law books from the jail's small library. She taught herself about criminal procedure, child custody laws, and financial fraud. Knowledge became her armor, understanding her weapon. Other women began joining her impromptu study sessions, finding hope in her methodical dismantling of legal complexities. The weekly phone calls with Lucas became her lifeline. Each Sunday, precisely at 2 p.m., she would hear his voice, and for those precious minutes, the jail walls would fade away. She memorized every detail, new words he'd learned, stories from school, the way his voice would catch when saying goodbye. After each call, she would return to her cell and add to her growing collection of letters, preserving every detail of their conversations for the day they would be reunited. The morning James Harrison discovered his empire crumbling began like any other. He strode into the supermarket, expensive suit perfectly pressed, radiating the same arrogant confidence that had defined him for years. But today was different. Instead of the usual deferential nods, he was met with steady gazes from employees who no longer feared him. The shift was subtle but unmistakable. Michael Anderson waited in the manager's office, now his office surrounded by boxes of meticulously organized evidence. Rachel Martinez, their lawyer, sat beside him, while 2 FBI agents stood quietly in the corner. The local news van parked outside was no coincidence. Every detail had been carefully orchestrated for maximum impact. James's face transformed from confusion to rage when he saw the assembled group. "What is this?" he demanded, reaching for his phone. Rachel spoke first, her voice carrying the weight of absolute certainty. "Mr. Harrison, I suggest you sit down. Your lawyer is already on his way, but you'll want to hear this before he arrives." The evidence unfolded like a carefully choreographed performance. Financial records spanning decades flashed across the screen, proof of systematic fraud, money laundering, and tax evasion. Each document bore James's signature, each transaction traced back to his personal accounts. His face grew paler with each revelation. "You've been busy," Michael James sneered, attempting to maintain his composure. Digging through ancient history, like a common thief, Michael met his gaze steadily. "No, James, I've been gathering truth. There's a difference." The use of his first name, a small act of defiance, made James's jaw clench. The confrontation escalated when Rachel presented the children's charity records. "Fascinating accounting," she remarked, laying out documents showing how donations meant for disadvantaged children had been funneled into offshore accounts. "The DA is particularly interested in this portion of your operation." James lunged for the papers, but the FBI agents moved swiftly. "That's private property," he shouted, desperation creeping into his voice. "Private? Like the evidence you manufactured against Sarah Thompson?" Michael asked quietly. The mention of Sarah's name made James freeze. Local reporters, tipped off about potential arrests at the store, had begun gathering outside. Through the office windows, James could see his carefully constructed world dissolving. Longtime customers stopped to stare, employees whispered in groups, and the morning sun illuminated every crack in his facade. "You think you've won," James hissed at Michael. "You have no idea what you're dealing with. One phone call and—" Rachel interrupted smoothly. "Your associates at the police department. Currently under internal investigation. The judge you bribed. Recused this morning. Your offshore accounts? Frozen." The security footage from Sarah's arrest played silently on the office monitor. James watched himself orchestrate her humiliation, his own face reflecting the cruelty of his actions. For the first time he saw himself as others did, not a powerful businessman, but a petty tyrant whose time had finally run out. Michael stood, his quiet authority filling the room. "It's over, James. The store is mine now, legally and properly purchased. But your crimes, those belong to the justice system." He placed a final document on the desk, a detailed confession from James's former accountant, outlining years of financial manipulation. Outside, Lucas arrived with Mrs. Martinez for his usual after-school visit. James caught sight of his son through the window, the boy he had abandoned, who now stood straight and tall like his mother. Something flickered in James's eyes, regret, perhaps, or the first genuine emotion he had shown in years. "You want to know your biggest mistake?" Michael asked softly. "It wasn't the fraud. It wasn't even the charity scam. It was thinking you could break Sarah's spirit by taking her freedom. You never understood that her strength comes from love, something you know nothing about." The arrival of James's lawyer coincided with the police cars pulling up outside. The community gathered to watch as justice finally caught up with James Harrison. Some filmed on their phones, others simply stood in silence, witnessing the end of an era of fear and manipulation. As the officers led James away, Michael caught a glimpse of Lucas watching from the store entrance. The boy's expression wasn't triumphant or angry, just thoughtful, wise beyond his years. In that moment, Michael understood that today's victory wasn't just about exposing crimes, it was about showing a child that truth and justice could prevail. The courthouse steps were crowded on the morning of Sarah Thompson's release hearing. Community members who had once shunned her now stood in quiet support, their presence a testament to how thoroughly the truth had transformed their small town. Michael Anderson waited near the front, Lucas's small hand firmly in his, both dressed in their best clothes for this moment. Inside the courtroom, Rachel Martinez presented their case with surgical precision. The evidence against James Harrison filled box after box after box, each document, each record, each piece of testimony building an irrefutable picture of corruption. The new judge, brought in after the previous one's recusal, listened intently, her expression growing graver with each revelation. "Your Honor." Rachel began, Sarah Thompson's arrest was not just a miscarriage of justice, it was the deliberate culmination of years of systematic abuse of power. Mr. Harrison didn't just fail to pay child support, he actively worked to destroy the mother of his child, using his influence to turn an entire community against her. The prosecution, faced with overwhelming evidence of James's corruption, had no choice but to drop all charges against Sarah. But Rachel pushed for more. "This case demands more than a simple dismissal. We seek full exoneration and compensation for wrongful imprisonment, defamation of character, and emotional distress." As each piece of evidence was presented, gasps rippled through the courtroom. Bank statements showing millions in misappropriated charity funds, sworn testimonies from former employees detailing years of intimidation, security footage revealing the calculated setup of Sarah's arrest. The truth, finally exposed to daylight, was more damning than anyone had imagined. Sarah sat quietly throughout the proceedings, her dignity intact despite her prison jumpsuit. Her eyes rarely left Lucas, drinking in the sight of her son after weeks of separation. When she did look away, it was to exchange brief glances with Michael, each one carrying unspoken volumes of gratitude and something deeper, something growing between them. The judge's decision, when it came, was unequivocal. This court finds not only that all charges against Sarah Thompson are to be dismissed with prejudice, but that she has been the victim of a prolonged and malicious campaign of persecution. The judge's voice carried righteous anger as she continued. "Furthermore, I am ordering an immediate review of all cases involving Mr. Harrison's testimony or influence." When the gavel fell, sealing Sarah's freedom, the courtroom erupted in applause. Lucas broke free from Michael's grip, running to embrace his mother for the first time in weeks. Their reunion, witnessed by the entire community, became a symbol of justice restored, a mother and son reunited, their love unbroken by false accusations and imprisonment. Outside the courthouse, Sarah faced the media with the same quiet strength she had shown throughout her ordeal. "I never lost faith," she said. Lucas pressed against her side, "because I knew the truth would prevail. My son never doubted me, and that gave me the strength to endure." Her words, broadcast across local news, began the process of publicly restoring her reputation. The civil settlement, negotiated by Rachel in the days following Sarah's release, was substantial. James's frozen assets ensured full payment of all back child support, plus significant damages for the false imprisonment and defamation. But for Sarah, the greatest victory was the official court declaration of her innocence, a document that would ensure Lucas would never have to doubt the truth about his mother. Michael watched as Sarah and Lucas left the courthouse together, their shadows merging in the late afternoon sun. The sight of them, finally reunited, made all the risks he had taken worthwhile. The store, the evidence gathering, the confrontation with James, everything had led to this moment of justice served and a family restored. The day concluded with an impromptu celebration at Mrs. Martinez's house, where the community gathered to welcome Sarah home. The same neighbors who had once believed James's lies now brought food, gifts, and heartfelt apologies. Sarah accepted their contrition with characteristic grace, understanding that healing required forgiveness. As Lucas fell asleep that night, finally in his own bed with his mother nearby, the last pieces of their fractured world began to realign. Justice had been served, truth had prevailed, and love had proven stronger than any force aligned against it. The transformation of Harrison's supermarket began at dawn on a Saturday morning, 3 days after Sarah's release. Michael Anderson stood before the store's facade, watching as workers removed the old signage that had cast such a long shadow over the community. Above them, a new sign waited to be unveiled: Community Market, where everyone belongs. Sarah arrived early, Lucas by her side, both eager to be part of the rebirth. The sight of her approaching made Michael's heart skip. She had traded her prison pallor for a healthy glow, and her smile, though still tentative, was genuine. "Ready to start something new?" he asked, extending his hand. She took it, and in that simple gesture, a partnership was born. The renovation crew discovered something telling behind the old sign. A faded name revealed that the store had once been called Thompson's Family Market before James had acquired it from Sarah's parents through his manipulative tactics. This revelation strengthened their resolve to restore not just the building, but its original spirit of community service. Inside, the transformation was dramatic. Gone were the harsh fluorescent lights and sterile aisles. Natural light now streamed through newly uncovered windows, while local artists painted murals celebrating the town's diversity on the walls. Each department was redesigned with both efficiency and comfort in mind, creating spaces where people could not just shop, but connect. Lucas had his own contribution: a children's reading corner near the front windows, complete with comfortable beanbags and shelves of books. "Mom always said education matters more than anything," he explained as he arranged the books carefully. The corner quickly became a favorite spot for neighborhood children to gather while their parents shopped. The store's policies underwent an equally profound change. Michael and Sarah instituted a fair wage program for all employees, with profit sharing and educational benefits. Former workers who had left under James's regime returned, drawn by the new atmosphere of respect and opportunity. The break room, once a dim afterthought, was transformed into a comfortable space with a small library and computer station for employees pursuing further education. Community involvement became central to the market's mission. A portion of the store was dedicated to local vendors, giving small producers a chance to reach customers directly. Mrs. Chen's bakery goods now had a permanent display, while other local entrepreneurs found a platform for their products. The weekly farmers' market in the parking lot became a celebration of local agriculture and craftsmanship. Perhaps the most significant change was the establishment of the Thompson Foundation, funded by the settlement from James's fraud case. The foundation provided food assistance to struggling families and educational scholarships for their children. Sarah insisted that applications be handled with complete dignity and privacy, remembering her own experiences of hardship. The grand reopening drew crowds that stretched around the block. Michael and Sarah stood together at the entrance, greeting each customer personally. Lucas proudly gave tours of his reading corner, while Mrs. Martinez organized a potluck featuring recipes from every cultural tradition in their diverse community. The store's security cameras, once tools of intimidation, were repurposed to create a public art installation. Time-lapse footage showed the market's transformation, while new cameras captured daily moments of community connection: children reading together, elderly neighbors catching up over coffee, young families shopping for their first homes. A special moment came when Sarah discovered her mother's old recipe box in the store's archives. These beloved family recipes became the foundation for a new prepared food section, where traditional dishes from all cultural backgrounds were celebrated. The aroma of fresh baked bread and simmering soups replaced the sterile smell of commercial cleaning products. The employee break room wall featured a growing collection of photographs: staff graduations, family celebrations, community events. Above them hung a simple motto: "Everyone's story matters here." It was Sarah's idea, born from her determination that no one should ever feel as isolated as she once had. Michael's office, once a fortress of solitude, became a shared space where he and Sarah worked together to build their vision. Their different strengths complemented each other perfectly: his head for business balanced by her heart for community, his strategic thinking enhanced by her intuitive understanding of people's needs. As closing time approached on opening day, Michael found Sarah standing in the reading corner, watching Lucas help a younger child sound out words. The sight of them, silhouetted against the sunset streaming through the windows, made his heart full. This was more than a business transformation, it was the healing of a community, the restoration of hope, and perhaps the beginning of something beautiful between two people who had found each other through adversity. The first sign of trouble came in the pre-dawn hours, 3 weeks after the community market's grand reopening. Michael's phone rang at 3 a.m. The store's security system had been triggered. Racing through empty streets, he arrived to find shattered windows and graffiti sprawled across the freshly painted walls. Traitors get what they deserve. Inside, the destruction was methodical and personal. The children's reading corner had been specifically targeted, books torn and scattered. Lucas's carefully arranged shelves lay in splinters, and the wall of community photos had been doused with black paint. Even the Thompson family recipe cards had been shredded, generations of history reduced to confetti on the floor. The surveillance cameras had been disabled with professional precision, suggesting this was no random vandalism. Detective Roberts, examining the scene, pointed out signs of insider knowledge. The perpetrators had known exactly where to cut power to the security system, how to access restricted areas, and most disturbingly, which items would cause the most emotional damage. Sarah arrived minutes after Michael called her, keeping Lucas home with Mrs. Martinez. Her face paled at the sight of the destruction, but it was the message spray painted above her mother's old recipe counter that hit hardest. Like mother, like son, both worthless. The words dripped red paint like blood. The financial impact was severe. Insurance adjusters, citing a clause about civil unrest, hesitated to cover the full damages. Suppliers, hearing rumors of trouble, began demanding payment up front. The community's initial outrage and support slowly gave way to whispered fears about shopping at a targeted business. Investigation revealed that several former associates of James Harrison had withdrawn large sums of money days before the attack. But proving connection to the vandalism proved impossible. They all had ironclad alibis, carefully constructed and mutually supporting. James himself remained in custody, but his influence clearly reached beyond prison walls. The morning newspaper carried the story on its front page, complete with photos of the destruction. The article subtly suggested that the market's new management had perhaps been naive in their community-focused approach, implying that James's heavy-handed security measures might have been justified after all. Michael and Sarah stood amid the wreckage, surveying the damage to more than just property. The safe space they had created, the symbol of community renewal, had been violated. Children who had made the reading corner their haven would now associated with violence. Local vendors would lose crucial income while repairs were made. The final blow came when they discovered their insurance premiums would triple after this incident, making their already tight margins nearly impossible to maintain. The bank, nervous about their loan in light of the attack, began making noises about reviewing their terms. But it was Lucas's reaction that truly revealed the depth of the wound. Finding a torn photograph of himself with his mother in the debris, he asked quietly, "Why do they hate us so much, Mom? We just wanted to help people." Sarah held him close, meeting Michael's eyes over their son's head. They both knew this attack was about more than mere vandalism. It was an attempt to break their spirit, to prove that their vision of community and healing couldn't survive in the real world. As dawn broke, casting harsh light on the destruction, Michael gathered their small team of employees who had arrived early despite everything. "This is not the end," he declared, though his voice carried more determination than confidence. "This is just another test," but looking at the devastation around them, even he wondered if some tests might prove too difficult to overcome. The weeks following the attack took a heavy toll on everyone involved with the community market. Michael worked 18-hour days, juggling insurance claims, supplier negotiations, and repair coordination. His savings, already depleted from buying the store, dwindled rapidly as he covered payroll from his personal accounts to keep his employees from suffering. Sarah watched helplessly as Michael pushed himself to exhaustion. One evening, finding him asleep at his desk surrounded by unpaid bills, she gently covered him with her jacket. The sight of his graying hair and deepening worry lines filled her with a complex mix of gratitude and guilt. "You've sacrificed too much for us," she whispered, though he couldn't hear. Lucas began having nightmares, waking in cold sweats calling for his mother. The vandalism had re-triggered his trauma from Sarah's imprisonment, manifesting in a new fear of separation. He started asking to sleep in Sarah's room, his childhood resilience shaken by this fresh reminder of their vulnerability. The strain showed in small ways, Michael's hands trembling as he signed another personal loan document, Sarah's smile faltering when customers asked about reopening dates, Lucas's reluctance to let either of them out of his sight. The community's initial surge of support began to waver as weeks passed without progress, whispers growing about the market becoming a liability to the neighborhood. Mrs. Martinez noticed Sarah losing weight, skipping meals to stretch their dwindling resources. The proud woman who had survived prison with her dignity intact now struggled to accept help from others, the weight of dependency pressing down on her shoulders. Each morning she would touch the defaced wall where her mother's recipes had hung, fighting back tears before plastering on a brave face for Lucas. Michael's sister called, begging him to cut his losses and return to his old life. "You're not responsible for them," she argued during a tense phone call. "You've done enough." But watching Sarah teach Lucas his multiplication tables in their makeshift office, Michael knew there was no going back. Some costs, though heavy, were worth bearing. The personal toll extended beyond the principal players. Store employees, loyal to the new vision, worked without pay to help with repairs. Mrs. Chen baked extra goods to feed the volunteer cleanup crews, despite her own business suffering from reduced foot traffic. The community's most vulnerable members felt the absence of the market's food assistance program most keenly. One night, Sarah found Michael staring at the clean but still empty children's reading corner. "I'm sorry," she began, but he cut her off gently. "Don't," he said, taking her hand. "I made my choice. We all did." The touch lingered, both drawing strength from the connection while fighting the guilt of finding personal happiness amid such struggles. Lucas, wise beyond his years, watched the adults in his life carry their burdens. One evening, he presented them with the drawing stick figures of the three of them holding hands in front of the store, the sun shining above. "We're still a family," he explained. Even when things are hard, his simple faith in their unity became both a comfort and a responsibility. The breaking point came on a rainy Tuesday evening, 6 weeks after the attack. Michael sat at his desk, staring at the final notice from the bank they were calling in the loan. Without immediate payment, the community market would be foreclosed within 30 days. Outside his office window, the partially repaired store stood as a testament to broken dreams and exhausted resources. Sarah found him there, his head in his hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. The sight of this strong man finally breaking under the weight of their shared burden shattered something inside her. "I've ruined you," she whispered, her voice catching. "Just like James said I would," the words hung in the air between them, heavy with despair. Lucas, doing homework in his usual spot near them, sensed the shift in atmosphere. Looking up, he saw his mother's tears and Michael's defeated posture. For the first time since the vandalism, his child's faith in the adult's ability to fix everything wavered. The homework fell forgotten as he watched his world threatening to crumble again. The thought of losing the market felt like a physical blow. More than a business, it had become a symbol of their resistance against injustice, their proof that love could triumph over hatred. Its failure would validate every cruel word James had ever spoken, every doubt the community had harbored. Sarah started packing up their few personal items, her movements mechanical. "We should leave," she said quietly. "Start fresh somewhere else. You can still salvage something. If we go now," the suggestion hung in the air like poison, a surrender to forces that had always believed they would fail. Michael watched her pack, unable to find words to stop her. The weight of financial ruin pressed down on his chest, making it hard to breathe. Every calculation, every possible solution had been exhausted. But the realization that he might not be able to protect this family he had grown to love felt like a personal failure. Lucas suddenly spoke up, his voice small but steady. "Mom said we don't run from bullies. She said we stand up for what's right." His words, echoing Sarah's own teachings, struck them both silent. The boy stood between them, a bridge across their growing gulf of despair. The rain intensified outside, drumming against the windows like an accusation. In the gathering darkness they could see their reflections overlaid on the glass, three people caught in a moment of decision, their futures hanging by the thinnest of threads. Sarah moved first, placing the box she'd been packing back on the desk. "Lucas is right," she said, though her voice trembled. "Running won't solve anything." It never has she reached for Michael's hand, then Lucas's, forming a circle in the dimly lit office. The darkness pressed in around them, but they held onto each other. No solutions presented themselves, no miracle appeared on the horizon, yet in their joined hands lay a defiance against defeat, a refusal to let their story end in failure. The breakthrough arrived in an unmarked envelope, delivered to Rachel Martinez's office on a Wednesday morning. Inside were documents that made her hand shake as she read detailed records of James Harrison's true financial empire, far more extensive and corrupt than they had imagined. The papers revealed a network of shell companies stretching back decades. James hadn't just stolen from the store and the charity, he had been running a sophisticated money laundering operation for several prominent criminal organizations. The attack on the community market wasn't just revenge, it was an attempt to protect these deeper secrets. Rachel immediately called an emergency meeting. Michael, Sarah, and Detective Roberts gathered in her office as she spread the documents across her desk. "Look at these signatures," she pointed out. The same names appear in the incorporation documents for companies across 3 states, all tied to James, all moving money through the charity foundation. More shocking were the lists of payoffs: judges, police officers, city officials. James's influence had reached further than anyone suspected. The recent vandalism had been orchestrated not just by his associates, but by corrupted law enforcement officers on his payroll, explaining why the investigation had stalled. Detective Roberts, examining the evidence, grew pale. Some of these names, their senior officers, people I've worked with for years. His hands shook as he recognized signatures of colleagues he had trusted. The extent of the corruption explained why so many investigations into James had mysteriously disappeared. The most damning evidence came from an unexpected source: James's former secretary. She had kept her own detailed records, a secret insurance policy against the day she might need protection. Her documentation provided the final links connecting James to both the organized crime syndicate and the attack on the market. "This isn't just about a store anymore," Rachel explained, her voice tight with urgency. "This is federal-level organized crime. The FBI needs to be brought in immediately." She was already reaching for her phone, direct lines to federal authorities at the ready. Sarah sat quietly, absorbing the implications. "All those years," she whispered, "I thought he was just a cruel man who hated me." I never imagined. Her voice trailed off as she realized how close they had all come to something far more dangerous than mere vandalism. Michael studied the documents, a weight lifting from his shoulders. This evidence wouldn't just save the market, it would ensure James could never threaten them again. The truth, finally fully exposed, would protect them more effectively than any security system. News of James Harrison's deeper crimes spread through the town like wildfire. The FBI's arrival, complete with evidence teams and dark vehicles, turned the community market into the epicenter of what local media called the largest corruption investigation in the state's history. The community's response was immediate and overwhelming. A hastily organized town meeting in the church basement turned into a spontaneous fundraising event. Mrs. Chen started it, standing up with tears in her eyes. "My family knows what it means to rebuild. I pledge $5,000 from my bakery's savings." Her declaration broke the dam of hesitation. Local business owners, many of whom had suffered under James's predatory practices, stepped forward one by one. The hardware store offered materials for repairs at cost. The local contractors' union volunteered labor. The high school's arts department proposed painting new murals to cover the vandalism. A crowd gathered outside the market the next morning, not to gawk but to work. People brought cleaning supplies, tools, and determination. The sight of the town's elderly judge wielding a paintbrush next to teenagers with pressure washers became a powerful symbol of community renewal. The local newspaper, finally free from James's influence, ran a front-page editorial titled "Our Market, Our Future." The article detailed how the community market had become more than a store. It was a testament to the town's resilience and unity. Subscription requests for their ongoing coverage of the investigation broke their website. Parents whose children had found refuge in Lucas's reading corner organized a book drive. The response was so overwhelming that the redesigned corner would be twice its original size, with new comfortable seating donated by the furniture store and a professional storyteller volunteering weekly sessions. Local banks, seeing the community's response, competed to offer new financing under favorable terms. The insurance company, faced with public pressure and federal scrutiny, reversed its decision and approved the full claim. Suppliers called to extend credit and offer preferential terms. Even former skeptics stepped forward. The Chamber of Commerce president, who had once supported James, organized a shop local campaign centered around the market. "We were wrong," he admitted publicly. "This store represents the best of who we can be." The transformation was most visible in the faces of those who had once shunned Sarah. Now they came forward with casseroles, offers of help, and sincere apologies. Each gesture, though small, helped heal old wounds and build new bridges. In the aftermath of the community's rallying, both Sarah and Michael found themselves transformed. Sarah, who had spent years guarding her heart behind walls of protective isolation, slowly learned to trust again. Each genuine smile from a neighbor, every sincere apology helped heal wounds she hadn't even realized were still bleeding. Michael discovered depths of strength he never knew he possessed. The man who had once been content to watch from the sidelines had become a leader, not through grand gestures but through quiet determination and unwavering integrity. His relationship with Sarah deepened beyond their shared struggles, built on a foundation of mutual respect and understanding. Lucas blossomed in the warmth of this new reality. His nightmares gradually subsided, replaced by excited chatter about the expanded reading corner and his role as its unofficial ambassador. The boy who had once slept behind the store now stood proudly beside his mother and Michael, helping new families feel welcome in their restored community space. The most profound change came in how they viewed themselves as a family. It happened gradually, in small moments, Michael automatically reaching for Sarah's hand during difficult meetings, Lucas asking for help with homework, and looking to both adults for guidance, shared laughter over dinner becoming a daily occurrence rather than a rare blessing. Sarah found herself able to forgive not just others but herself. The guilt she had carried for exposing Lucas to hardship transformed into pride in raising a son who understood the value of standing up for what's right. Her strength, once born of necessity, became a choice, a testament to resilience rather than a shield against the world. Michael's own healing came through action. Each decision to trust, to build, to move forward despite fear, helped erase the echoes of his brother's voice questioning his courage. He discovered that true bravery wasn't about grand gestures, but about showing up every day, choosing love over fear, community over isolation. Together they learned that family isn't defined by blood or circumstance, but by daily choices to support, protect, and believe in each other. Their shared experience of nearly losing everything had taught them the true value of what they had built together. The official reopening of the community market, 6 months after the vandalism, marked more than just a business recovery. As Michael cut the ribbon stretched across the newly restored entrance, with Sarah and Lucas by his side, The gathered crowd's cheers echoed through streets that had once been silent with fear and suspicion. Inside, the transformation was complete. The children's reading corner had doubled in size, now featuring a hand-painted mural of diverse children sharing stories. Local artists had turned the vandals' destruction into inspiration, incorporating elements of healing and renewal into every repaired surface. The wall of community photos had been restored and expanded, now including images of the rebuilding process itself. James Harrison's sentencing hearing had concluded the previous week, resulting in a 30-year federal prison term for racketeering, money laundering, and organized crime connections. His criminal empire, fully exposed, had crumbled. More importantly, his hold over the community had been permanently broken, his legacy of fear replaced by one of rebirth and unity. The Thompson Foundation, restructured and expanded with recovered funds from James's hidden accounts, now occupied the building's second floor. Sarah directed its operations, focusing on supporting single parents and children in crisis. The Foundation's first initiative provided educational scholarships to children of incarcerated parents, turning pain into purpose. Local vendors filled the market's shelves with products that told their own stories of perseverance. Mrs. Chen's bakery counter became a permanent fixture, her traditional recipes displayed alongside Sarah's mother's restored collection. The store's inventory reflected the community's diversity, with sections dedicated to cultural foods and crafts from every neighborhood. The market's success sparked a revival in the surrounding area. Empty storefronts filled with new businesses, many started by people who had received support from the Thompson Foundation. The farmers' market expanded to twice weekly, becoming a celebration of local agriculture and entrepreneurship. Michael's office, once a solitary space, had evolved into a shared workspace where he and Sarah collaborated on new community initiatives. Lucas's drawings decorated the walls, alongside business plans and community event calendars. The security cameras, once tools of surveillance, now captured daily moments of connection and celebration to be shared on the market's community board. The most significant change was invisible but profound: the shift in how the community viewed itself. People who had once hurried past each other now stopped to chat, sharing news and offering help. The market had become more than a store, it was a symbol of what people could achieve when they chose hope over fear, unity over division. On a bright spring morning, Sarah Thompson stood in her office at the community market, adjusting her wedding dress with trembling hands. The past year had transformed the store into more than just a business success. It had become the heart of their story, making it the perfect venue for this next chapter. Michael had proposed in the children's reading corner, getting down on one knee while Lucas filmed the moment on Mrs. Martinez's phone. His words were simple but profound: "You both showed me what family really means. Will you let me be part of yours forever?" Sarah's tears of joy matched Lucas's excited cheers. The wedding preparations transformed the market into a celebration space. Local vendors contributed their specialties, creating a feast that represented every culture in their community. Mrs. Chen's wedding cake, a masterpiece of traditional and modern designs, took center stage. The children's reading corner became a magical space filled with flowers and twinkling lights. Lucas took his role as best man seriously, proudly wearing his new suit and carefully guarding the rings. He had written his own speech, hidden safely in his pocket, words that would later bring tears to every eye. "Mom always said home is where love is." Now we have two homes: the market and our family. The ceremony itself was simple but meaningful. Customers became guests, employees became family, and the market's wide aisles became the venue for a celebration of love and community. The judge who had exonerated Sarah performed the ceremony, her words emphasizing the triumph of justice and love over adversity. As Sarah and Michael exchanged vows beneath an arch of locally grown flowers, their promises reflected the journey that had brought them there. "I choose you," Sarah said, her voice strong and clear, "not despite our struggles, but because of how we faced them together." The market's security cameras, once tools of oppression, captured a different kind of memory that day, moments of joy, celebration, and the beginning of a new family officially united. The footage would join the wall of community photos, a testament to how far they had come. Mrs. Martinez, watching Lucas dance with his mother at the reception, wiped away tears of joy. The boy who had once slept frightened behind the store now moved with confidence, secure in the love of both his mother and his new father. The community's wedding gift was a surprise announcement. The street outside the market would be renamed Thompson Way, recognizing not just the store's history, but its role in transforming the neighborhood. The sign would serve as a permanent reminder that justice and love could triumph over adversity. Years after the events that transformed their lives, the community market stands as a testament to the power of love, resilience, and community. On quiet evenings, when the last customers have left and the sun casts long shadows through the windows, the story of its transformation still echoes through its aisles. Sarah and Michael Anderson Thompson's office remains a hub of activity, now featuring family photos alongside business plans. Lucas, growing into a thoughtful teenager, still helps younger children in the reading corner after school, sharing the lessons his parents taught him about courage and perseverance. The Thompson Foundation has expanded beyond their small town, helping other communities build their own centers of hope and renewal. Sarah often speaks at conferences, sharing their story not as a tale of victimhood, but as proof that justice and love can prevail against seemingly insurmountable odds. The market's success inspired similar transformations across the region. Other communities, facing their own struggles with corruption and division, look to their model of community ownership and involvement. Michael frequently mentors new business owners, teaching them that true success lies in serving rather than exploiting their communities. Lucas's original reading corner has spawned a network of similar spaces in stores across the state. Each one bears a small plaque with his childhood words, "Everyone's story matters here." The program has helped countless children find refuge and inspiration in books, just as he once did. James Harrison's name has faded from community memory, replaced by stories of how ordinary people united to build something extraordinary. The market's history is now taught in local schools as a lesson in civic responsibility and the power of collective action. The most profound legacy, however, lives in the daily interactions that fill the market. Every time a struggling parent finds support, every time a child discovers a new book, every time neighbors from different backgrounds share recipes and stories, the promise of that transformation is renewed. Sarah, Michael, and Lucas's story proves that family isn't just about blood, it's about the choices we make and the love we share. Their journey from despair to triumph demonstrates that even in the darkest moments, hope can flourish if we have the courage to nurture it. The market's motto, painted above its entrance, captures the essence of their story. Where everyone belongs, it's more than just words, it's a daily commitment to building a world where justice, compassion, and community prevail over fear and division. In the end, their story teaches us that true change begins with individual acts of courage, grows through community support, and flourishes when we choose love over fear, unity over division, and hope over despair. The community market stands not just as a business, but as living proof that together we can transform darkness into light. If this story of love, resilience, and justice touched your heart, please take a moment to share your thoughts in the comments below. Your perspective matters to our community of storytellers. Don't forget to subscribe to join us on more journeys of hope and transformation, and help us reach more people who need to hear these messages of courage and redemption. Share this video with friends and family who might find strength in Sarah, Michael, and Lucas's story. Every like, comment, and share helps spread the message that love and justice can triumph over adversity. Together, let's build a community that believes in the power of storytelling to change lives.